Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I wanted to have a little bathrobe conversation on a wonderful individual I knew many, many years ago. Her name was Miss Holmes, and she came from a family that lived in Washington, D.C., and she spent many of the years of her life in Washington, D.C., and obviously involved in a lot of the political circles. Now, I don't know several aspects about Miss Holmes. I met Miss Holmes when I was a boy. Now, this took place in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and the year was 1968. And here we are on the cusp of the year 2018. This is 50 years ago. And I used to go visit her because I was fascinated by history. And it's really amazing if you get the chance to visit someone who has touched history, to talk to them. It's well worth doing. It really is. And so, by chance, I happened to meet her, and I don't remember how I met her. But the end result was I used to go and pay visits. It was a thing people used to do years ago. You go and drop by and you'd sit and chat. And I used to love to visit Miss Holmes. Now, she was 89 years of age at the time. She had been born in 1879. And she had worked in the government in Washington, D.C. And so she had a ringside seat to many of the activities going on in Washington, D.C. And she would regale me with story after story after story of presidents and senators and actors and people she had met in her many years in Washington. Now, she remembered seeing William McKinley. She talked about seeing him a lot. And she said he would be riding in his buggy, riding around Washington, D.C., just for fun. I guess that's what he did, I guess for a form of relaxation. He didn't have a driver. He did it himself. That's what she was saying. She said he was driving his own buggy. Another thing, she was quite, for some reason, involved with the Taft administration. Now, I can't tell you how. I don't know now. But she used to talk about William Howard Taft quite a bit. And she said he was a very genial, nice man. And she met him several times. And she said that he used to love to tell stories about his size. Because he was a big man. At the height of his weight, he was like 350 pounds. And she said he used to say when he was a lawyer, in his early days, he was a big guy. And he would end up in Podunk Center, wherever it was, in whatever state. And a lot of times when you would go to a railroad station, the train wouldn't automatically just stop there. They would only stop for large groups of people. They wouldn't stop for a person. And so he arrived at this train station in whatever city it was, and he went to the telegraph operator who was there and asked him to send a message to the train's dispatcher and to tell them that there was a large party waiting for the train. Well, the train arrived, and he got on, and he said, "I'm the large party." And on he went. She didn't like Theodore Roosevelt. Interesting. She said he was not very nice to women. I don't know why she had that opinion. She called him a blowhard. It's interesting. You know things about Roosevelt, but someone who saw him firsthand had that interesting perspective about him. She talked about Wilson. She said she watched Wilson age. Interesting. Well, there was a war going on, I guess. And she said the last time she saw Wilson, he walked with a profound limp. Now, you have to understand something. I was 10 years old. I was trying to learn everything about the presidency, and I didn't know a lot of things about it. You know, I was memorizing all kinds of things about the American presidency, and as I mentioned before, I was making recordings for the school I was going at of the things I had studied. And of course, a number of years later, I learned about Woodrow Wilson's stroke and how he walked with a profound limp. And then everything that Miss Holmes mentioned made sense. She talked about driving. She did have a car. She drove a Model T Ford. And she told me something interesting, and I don't know how correct this is, but maybe it is. She said that the old Fords had gravity feed tanks for their gas. And she said, if the tank wasn't well filled, and you tried to go up a hill forward, the car would sputter out. She said what you had to do was back up the hill, and you could get up to the top of the hill with a lower amount of gas in the tank. Who would have ever thought of that? And that's the neat thing about talking to people who were there. She talked about Harding. She saw him. She did not meet him. She said he was handsome and charismatic. And that's where her talk on the presidency ended. I guess she moved from Washington at that point. It's a pity. You know, she talked about so many different people that she saw and met. And I just remember, like, the presidents at this point. I used to visit her maybe once or twice a week. And I would luxuriate in air conditioning. She had an air conditioner. Now, in 1968, lots of people didn't have air conditioners. That was a big luxury. We would just sit there and swelter. And living in Florida, it was hot. And so I used to love to sit there, and she would just talk and tell me stories. You know, I wish we had the technology that's right here back then. All the things I could have captured. And what I have to do now is try to remember 50 years hence the things that she mentioned. Perhaps if I sat here and talked and talked and talked, some of the stuff would come back. Maybe. But I wanted to just share a few things about a lovely lady who influenced a little boy, Miss Holmes. Now, she died in 1970. And she was nearly 91 years of age. I was really kind of struck by that. But I think that here, as we enter the year 2018, that Miss Holmes would be happy to know that the little boy she talked to and told stories to, 50 years later, is sharing her stories to a world and an age and to a technology that she could not even have dreamed of. Lastly, a late Happy Hanukkah and a soon-to-be Merry Christmas to everyone. And, most of all, Happy New Year to 2018. And a very belated but heartfelt thanks to Miss Holmes. Thank you for helping out a little boy and teaching him and sharing history, because it doesn't get any better than that.